Loose White dive on it.
This is twice now the Celtics have been first to the floor. They try to
Save with Horford. Unbelievable.
Boston first to the floor. So good.
Brown face fires up the three. Bang! Tatum dives on the floor. Everybody dives. Jaylen Brown with the flush. Blocked by Porzingis. He's doing it all. Tatum spinning, driving, layup. Got it. Washington drives. Blocked by White. Oh, what a block from Derek White.
Welcome into another episode of First to the Floor. Ben Vallis here. Thank you for joining us. Hope you're doing well. We've got 12 days until Celtics Media Day. 12 days until the offseason is basically over. Alongside me, Wayne Spooney and Jake Eisenberg. Guys, how we doing?
We're here. I'm excited to see some of Spooney's divorce level research here tonight. Talk some Tatum. Screw the football. Screw the Dolphins Bills. This is First to the Floor time.
That's right.
I don't know about you guys, but after watching Tatum on Fallon, I just really have a strong urge to read the Communist Manifesto. I welcome Overlord Comrade Jayson Tatum to take over the country and seize the means of production. Looking forward to it, boys.
Yes, everyone working together as one for the glory of the Celtics. We've got a fun show for you tonight. We'll be reacting to, as we just mentioned, Tatum's appearance on Jimmy Fallon last night before getting to some news around the team. And we'll top it off with a quick Neemias Queta deep dive. I know there's varying levels of effort and research going into this one. Shout out to RJ as well in the Discord, who I know is personally very excited about this deep dive. I got to give a shout out as well to our guy, Jack Simone from the How About Them Celtics podcast. Arrived via the mail yesterday, a huge pouch of confetti from the championship Game 5 celebrations, scooped up off the floor, I like to imagine, from TD Garden. So shout out to Jack, and go check out the How About Them Celtics podcast and the Celtics Lab podcast, both great pods under the CLNS media umbrella. Guys, let's just get to it. Jayson Tatum has been on an insane run of media appearances this past week. As if his offseason hasn't been busy enough. But last night, it sort of culminated, I guess, in an appearance on The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon. I do have a picture here somewhere, which we can show without breaching copyright. Here we go. Aforementioned Castro fit, I think is maybe the jumping off point here. Jake Spooney, thoughts?
Loved it.
Who's the stylist?
Loved it.
I don't know. Maybe Ella May is, low-key just one for all and all for one,
How many communist quips are we going to throw in on this show?
Probably a lot. I got a lot in the pocket here. Yeah. So, look, the original big three was Lenin, Stalin, and Trotsky. So it makes sense in a basketball standpoint that you dress like a communist, right? It just makes a lot of sense. Just understated, perfect olive green, lots of pockets so you can stuff various papers and
cigars.
Propaganda to hand out to folks. Yeah, cigars,
leaflets.
Too, sure. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. He's gonna go leafing with the boys after this and let folks know. So I love the fit. It was amazing.
Yeah. Jake, thoughts?
The fit's good. He's so obviously the probably the main thing that made the round probably is the rap battle. It's either the rap battle or the MVP, comments. And so the word cringe / corny is thrown around a fair bit when talking about Jayson Tatum, obviously. And this actually, in my opinion, doesn't fall into cringe / corny, because you can only be cringe if you're doing something for the approval of other people where you think you're cool or you're trying to be cool. I refuse to believe that Jayson Tatum thought that this was cool. And so I feel like he lent into this being a kid's book that he was promoting, and he knew this was not cool. And he's gotten so much shit by the Twitter trolls, etc. And I tweeted out, I was like, this is pretty much confirmation that Jayson Tatum doesn't give a fuck about Twitter. And it was very funny because I got someone named Claw World, who is a Kawhi Leonard stan with 9,000 followers, being like, yes, he does. You could just see how he's acting at the Olympics. And it just makes me so happy that there's people like us in their basement, but actually think that their tweets are having an impact on the psyche of someone like Jayson Tatum. And so to see him come out and it's be clearly not caring. That's a good sign for me.
Yeah, Spoonie, is this a clear sign that JT just doesn't give a shit?
It's you don't do that if you give a shit. I mean, like when I saw it, I was like, oh no, he's gonna get absolutely roasted for this, and like he doesn't give a shit. I kind of am like, fuck, man, you're making it tough to defend you sometimes, big dog. But no, that's a great take, Jake. You've actually made me feel a lot better about it because like if you were just presented that video without context, it's kind of like he's got no flow, man. Like, you know, like I was hoping for it sounding better than Jimmy Fallon at least, and he kind of did, but it was like an elementary school nursery rhyme style rhyme. So it was fine. It was something. It's something to talk about in September before training comes out. Yeah. Ben, where were you? I need to know your thoughts on this, Ben.
Well, so when he asked Questlove to drop the beat, that was a smooth introduction. It seemed like a guy who knew what he was doing. He called on, we'll call him the selector in Questlove there, like the sort of MC of the band, the leader of the band, dropped the beat. But then from then on, it was completely downhill. Just down to like the mic holding technique looked awkward, looked like me figuring out how to use my wife's KitchenAid, just no idea, no dexterity, no experience. Yeah, I know. I'm going to blend my hand off of this thing. So yeah, all downhill from there. And then clearly reading off a teleprompter, which I think gave him some slack back because it's like, okay, there's a writer's room and he's just such a good guy, has so much natural aura as like a person and a leader and a role model. And he's like, yeah, okay, whatever. Like I'm here to promote a kid's book. I'll do whatever you ask of me, including reading your like bullshit words off of this teleprompter for the entertainment of your audience. I did think that Jimmy Fallon needed to do a better job of elevating the presence of JT. Like he has to understand this is basically his first like solo mainstream television appearance in that capacity. And we said, well, I said in our Discord before the show, the link to the Discord, by the way, is in the description below, that Jimmy Fallon had his work cut out for him to try and elevate Jayson Tatum and essentially, you know, credits to JT, but I'll just say it, like make him not boring. And I don't think he did a good enough job at that. And I've seen him really go above and beyond to elevate other way more boring guests on his show before. And he just didn't put in the same effort. So he's not going to get the Joe Mazzulla stamp of approval. He did not embody the whatever it takes, however long it takes mentality going into this interview with Jayson Tatum. So Jimmy Fallon has a lot to answer for. So JT, I guess the summary, right, doesn't give a fuck. And we still love him very much. But Spoonie, you mentioned if this is presented without context. And I think for a lot of people, it was and it has been. And therefore, he's probably copying a little bit of shit, rightfully so.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
But the other part of this that like made the round was like I saw Kendrick Perkins is back in our life, which is just on one hand it's maybe good because basketball's getting closer to being back, but the fact that Kendrick Perkins is back on my timeline is a terrible thing. I didn't watch the thing, but he's like it was like selfishness was like his word of the day when it came to Jayson Tatum talking about the MVP. And it's just funny because Tatum was also on a morning show. Nate Burleson is on a morning show now, who was like a fringe wide receiver for the Detroit Lions and then was on NFL Network. And now he was awesome. And he's made the smart decision to go do morning TV, which is very cool. But Tatum was on that show as well. And he did I thought a really good job interviewing for that one because Nate was like, people are thinking, you know, revenge season, stuff like that. And Tatum goes, I'd love to win MVP, but team success takes precedent over everything else. And then plenty of guys have won MVP and won the title as well. And shockingly, of the two clips that get picked up for Kendrick Perkins, it's the second one where it's like, who's going to win MVP? And it's like, he's literally that's laying Tatum up to say himself, obviously, for that specific question. So just more nonsense. But I actually really liked Tatum's appearance on the morning show with Burleson. I thought he sounded like a politician. He was like really smooth and really crisp. It was like one of his better performances in an interview. And I thought that he answered that question in particular. And that seems to be the actual drumbeat as far as comments coming out. It's like not skipping steps. He said that in the same interview. We're not skipping steps. We got to go back. And that's why we were successful last year. Because he's talked about how the year when they lost to the Heat in the conference finals, after the year they made the finals, he's like, I just want to get back. I want to get back. Let me get me to the playoffs. And he has now learned that that's not how it works. And so just positive reinforcement. Keep parodying our boy Joe Mazzulla. He's like the most coachable guy in the world. He's just full of Brad Stevens-isms and Joe Mazzulla-isms. He's freaking perfect basketball player.
And isn't the media training like low-key impressive when, he's just like dodging, like people, they're throwing punches at him essentially, like trying to get him oftentimes to say something, even on Fallon where he was like, who's going to win MVP, who's going to be the matchup in the finals, and he says himself for MVP, which is like great, just don't implicate anyone else, don't bring any other names into the news cycle, and then just go, we're just going to run it back with the same matchup finals-wise as last year, which is like the least controversial thing you can say, and he's doing this all on the fly. He's 26 years old. Probably some parallels to his decision-making on the court as well. And this is obviously a very biased Jayson Tatum fan talking, but very impressive. I'm trying, speaking of thinking on the fly, to think of a way to segue to the next part of our Jayson Tatum segment here, which is basically to talk about how he could be the second best player in the league if you want to factor in some of the more, I guess, like media favored stats or like ball knower favored stats, like Darko Daily Plus Minus, which we'll get into in a second. But I want to ask you guys, we talked about on our live stream yesterday where we live streamed game one, a rewatch party, game one of the NBA Finals. Are you guys both writing about Jayson Tatum for Celtics blog at the moment? Because Spoonie, I know you're like specifically covering like the aura, like public opinion aspect of Tatum at the moment. What are you guys both working on in that sense?
Go ahead,
That's
Sweeney.
what I'm right now. Yeah, well, I basically the goofy ass, stupid, subjective aura discussion has now started bleeding into the objective evaluation of his game as a player, and that's really, really, really dumb. And that also happened to Tim Duncan. So I just kind of discussed that, and like at the end of Duncan's career, I found articles from this year saying Duncan was the most underrated player of all time. Like, that's how much it impacted Duncan's career because he was fucking boring, that he was underrated despite winning 5 titles and multiple MVPs. So I think the same thing is happening to Tatum. So
yeah, it's going to be different for a few reasons, but like, you got Duncan and Kobe was the ant of that generation. If you're going to, like, I guess, compare Kobe being the cool one and Duncan being the less cool one, I don't think Ant ever reaches anywhere close to Kobe levels either. But yeah, like Ant is to Tatum's Duncan.
Ant is Iverson.
Ant Iverson. Okay, got
Yeah.
it. Got it.
Big
That's
time.
a great comparison.
Yeah. Cool as hell. Everyone thinks he's better than he is because he's cool as hell. Stolen MVP, which will probably happen with Ant at some point.
Hell yes. Yep, that's about right. And then, yeah, I'm just writing about, it's simple, just to quell everyone's lizard brain, that can Jayson Tatum shoot? And does it actually matter if you can shoot anyway? So I don't know how long it takes from submitting to publishing. Spoonie probably has a better idea from that, but I'm sure they'll be coming out over the next few days. And yeah, so that's what mine's. And I had a throwaway line about Tim Duncan and Jayson Tatum without us talking to each other either. So
Great minds, baby.
almost like we've spent countless hours talking about Jayson Tatum together.
And bonding in Vegas during Summer League.
right.
Yeah, well, look, we've got a link to like Spoonie's Celtics blog profile in the description below. This applies to the audio podcast and the YouTube show. We'll have to throw Jake's in there as well now that he's a full-time Celtics blog writer. But he talked about the Tim Duncan side of things, and shout out to our guy Tice in the Discord. He threw this up here, which I've just realized is too small for me to now read. But essentially, Tim Duncan, this graph, I think is from, or this chart rather, is from StatMuse. Tim Duncan had the highest plus minus by a player in his first 7 seasons at plus 3,630, if I can read that tiny writing. Jayson Tatum is in there at number 5 ranked as far as plus minus rankings in the first 7 seasons of their career. Some have called him Wing Duncan, as I unblock Spoonie's face from the stream here. Welcome back, Spoonie. Yeah, so there's interesting correlation there, particularly when you talk about like from the culture perspective, I guess the boring aspects of Tatum's play and how he's kind of underrated, I think, and this is what we were discussing in our stream yesterday, because of how infrequently he jumps off the page from a culture standpoint. He totally flies under the radar from an on-the-court production standpoint. And this is a guy who like just led his team to a championship. Obviously didn't win the conference finals or finals MVP. Rightfully deserved to Jaylen Brown, and that's an argument for a different day if you want to speak contrary to that. But suffice to say, Jayson Tatum is incredibly good, but he's sort of, it's 7 years now going into, I believe, his 8th year in the league, and he's consistently fly below the sort of fanscape attention radar, if you will. So in this sort of second half, moving on from the media circus that he's just, very successfully completed, I guess we wanted to talk about some of those underrated aspects. So we just talked about the plus minus aspect. If you scroll through Spoonie's Twitter right now, it's just like some of the best modern day pro Jayson Tatum propaganda you will ever see. I don't know if either of you guys want to speak to this one, but again, it's from StatMuse, and it's just the fact that on aggregate, Jayson Tatum has a plus minus of plus 3,111 in his career. Like, it seems like no matter how you slice it, you can easily make a case for him being like kind of one of the easily top 5 best players in the league right now.
Yeah, the Celtics just really good with him on the court. And like in the regular season, this was like the first time in his career where it wasn't as pronounced as normal. And then what happened when we got to the playoffs? As soon as Jayson Tatum went off the court, the Celtics were not nearly as good as when he was on the court. And that is just true no matter who was on this team, whether it's Tristan Thompson and Daniel Tice at the starting front court, or it's Derek White, Drew Holiday, Kristaps Porzingis, Al Horford, Jaylen Brown. Like, Jayson Tatum is the straw that stirs the drink. It's not a freaking accident that he leads the team in points, rebounds, assists, minutes, usage, plus minus. Like, it's not an accident. It's not a surprise. And when we were watching the game 1 yesterday, like, it just jumped off the page. And when you're watching a game a second time, things are going to jump off in a different way. And it's just like so many possessions happen because of Jayson Tatum. Like, Jaylen Brown is kind of remembered for that in the third quarter when the Mavs cut it to 8 and Jaylen Brown gets himself to the line a couple of times. But the reason like Jaylen Brown got to the line and was able to like get the defense out of position where he was able to draw those fouls were right off Jayson Tatum initiating and collapsing the defense and getting the ball moving. It's like over and over and over again. There was he collapses the defense, finds Kristaps Porzingis for a wide open 3, who misses the 3. Jayson Tatum gets the offensive rebound, quick post up, Kristaps cuts, Tatum finds him. It's just like the little things that he does that aren't gonna, end up on NBA Twitter's, viral tweets, because it's like, who cares about that play? But he just creates swings within these games over and over again on both ends that add up in the plus minus and add up in the freaking win column.
Yeah, like him coming off the center to cut off a driver and then getting back to the center. There's no stat that tells you that, right? It's like, but he probably just saved 2 points, forced a kick out, and then, we're not going into deep rotation because Tatum's able to help and recover quick because he's a super athletic power forward guarding the center, right? And yeah, on the offensive end, like that entire playoff run, I think was like a tribute to how good he's become as like a floor general and manipulating defenses. And like I bet 70% of our possessions where Tatum was on the floor started with him initiating the offense. He essentially played point guard and guarded centers for an entire playoff run. So I just brought this up, or rather I just looked this up. For Tatum's entire career in the playoffs, the Celtics are plus 1.5 with him off the floor. They are plus 8.3 with him on the court, which is bananas, man.
Entire career.
Entire career, they are. That's like a 60-win pace almost in the fucking playoffs, including like his rookie year, his second year, before he was even like a superstar. So like that's how dominant he is. And I think what people undervalue is like, I don't know if I could say he's a playoff riser, but he absolutely maintains his level of excellence in the playoffs. And there are not that many guys who do that. Like basically everybody drops at least a little bit, other than like Jimmy Butler is like the only guy I can truly think of that's absolutely better in the playoffs than he is in the regular season. Like Tatum's ability to just like be the same guy in the playoffs as he is in the regular season is super underrated, and he's never fucking hurt. So, like, not only are you getting his massive impact, you're always getting it because he's always playing, which is another underrated aspect of his game. So, like, the dude is a fucking winner, period. That's it. And that's what should matter to people. But, Luka scored 3 more points and have 4 more assists. It's like, yeah, he got beat up in 5 games, and we attacked him every possession on defense. Like, who's the better player?
People are obsessed with the 3-point percentage.
Yeah, they are
like obsessed, and it's ironic.
2K stats.
2K stats. It's ironic because Luka shot worse from three in the finals. Jalen also shot worse from three in the finals. People are hyper fixated on Tatum's ability to shoot threes in a way they just aren't for other players. And like, yeah, it's really hard to. It's just so frustrating when he's doing so many more things. But it's like, if he was to have made one more 3-pointer per game, he would have shot 42% from three, and people would be like, "Oh my god!" But it's like, are 3 extra points per game changing literally anything about what happened to the Celtics in the playoffs? No, they're going to go 16-3 still because the 3 games they lost, they got smoked. It's like there's literally going to be no change in the outcome. Which is why his impact is not defined by his 3-point shot and even his field goal percentage to some extent as well.
So I want to serve up the main course here, but I want to be careful not to, my own personal usage rate to be too high as the one person on the stream who's not currently writing about or hasn't just written about Jayson Tatum. But I mentioned like advanced stats that are favored by sort of the more ball-knowing corners of the media sphere, and that is Darko DPM, which is daily plus minus. And it's essentially how much the Darko model thinks a given player has impacted the score of a given game. And we've got a couple of ways of slicing it here. The DPM rankings suggest that Jayson Tatum behind Nikola Jokic might very well be the second best player in the NBA, which given a lot of the negative attention he's getting at the moment, even today, Zach Lowe, 30 minutes before this show went live, dropped a pod. It's like, is Jayson Tatum ever going to win MVP? And I caught 10 minutes of it before we went live here. And they're basically like, no, he won't. Well, Darko DPM says otherwise, folks. And then another way of slicing the Darko DPM side of things, and Spoonie, again, this is from your Twitter, it just compares him to some of his peers, or like some people who fans might think are equal to or better than Jayson Tatum, such as Anthony Edwards, Devin Booker, Jalen Brunson. And you can look at like the career trajectory based on this Darko DPM stat. It just has Jayson Tatum like well and truly a cut above what many would consider his equals or his peers in the league. So I said I wasn't going to talk too much, and then I went ahead and did just that. So Spoonie, Jake, I'll throw it to you guys.
I do think it's unlikely that he does win MVP at some point. Like it's especially today. Like, think about the last few MVPs. I mean, it's basically just been Embiid and Jokic for the last 4 MVPs, right? Shea got kind of close. You're just going to need to be... there's a chance, obviously, but it's not going to happen definitely not next season. I'd be stunned. And then the year after, maybe. But then, like, once this team has to retool, in theory, given the CBA stuff, like, when there isn't an Al or a KP or a Jarek or a Drew, whatever it may be, or even saying that out loud makes my sphincter unhappy. But like, until he has to go back to like a version of what he did in the 20/21 season, where he was putting up 50 bombs on the regular, he had his career high 60-point game against the Spurs. Like, he hasn't had to do stuff like that, where he has 50 points in the play-in game against the Wizards and then 50 points again in the first round. He hasn't had to be that guy last season and the year before, because that's not going to be conducive to team success. That's just not going to be how they win more games. So maybe in a year or two, when he has no choice but to raise his usage up another level, and it's more like role players that can't do as much as the Derek Whites and Drew Holidays, that's when an MVP becomes, because he's always going to kind of have a chance because of his durability. And like, I think there's going to be a fatigue factor when it comes to Jokic. Luka will eventually win one, just because like his counting stats are just so insane. Everybody loves Shea because this scoring efficiency, consistency, people are obsessed with it. And Tatum kind of saves his highest impact stuff for the playoffs, which I'm totally fine with. Like, I don't need him going balls to the walls defensively in the regular season. If he played his playoff level defense in the regular season, that would definitely give him a better chance. But he's not going to do that, and I don't think he should. So it's just hard for a wing. Like, when's the last time a wing won MVP? Like, do we have to go back to LeBron for him to actually have done it? Steph did it.
Durant.
Durant didn't do it. Durant didn't do it since like 2014.
It's 2014.
Exactly. So like, it's been a while since our wing MVP has actually popped up. So they're kind of hard to just straight up, because Luka's a point guard. Like, he has the ball in his hands all the time. Shea's a point guard. You're going to have the ball in your hands so much. So it's kind of like the archetype isn't really there.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, dude. I don't think he's ever going to win an MVP, and that's just fine. Like I was saying, compared him to Duncan. We both compared him to Duncan. Jake, he's not going to be as good as Tim Duncan.
No.
Because Tim Duncan's like one of the 6 best players of all time, right?
Correct.
And I'm not really saying he's going to be as good as Duncan. But yeah, I agree with all that, Jake. I think going back to the Darko DPM thing really quick, like, could you bring that chart up again? Quickly, Ben, sorry. So Darko DPM is predictive. It's trying to take previous information and predict how this guy is going to play in the future. So that's why you see that big dip in 21-22. That's because that's just after he got COVID. So it's taking all his COVID stats and projecting it out, and it thinks he's getting worse. Obviously, then he gets healthy in 2021, and he fucking skyrockets again. And he's like twice as good as some of these guys per this stat, which, isn't a apples to apples comparison. But yeah, he's way above Edwards, Booker, and Brunson through Darko. So I don't see him, at least in the current. I think the Celtics are too good at building teams for Tatum to ever win MVP.
Well, yeah, that's I was just gonna say that, like,
Yeah.
So looking at the MVPs, by the way, it's like Jokic, Embiid, Jokic, Giannis, who we forgot, and he's like almost a wing, but he's not really. And then Harden, Westbrook, Curry, and then it's Durant, and that's 2014. Durant, LeBron, back 2012, 13, 14. So like that's not gonna happen. But yeah, so the problem is as well, Tatum and Jalen make it so easy to build around because they can play a variety of roles, especially Tatum. So you can fit all these good players around him so that like he's not going to have to be a guy like this. Like the level of usage required to reach James. Do you remember what James Harden was doing in that like he was averaging
40%
like
usage one year.
Yes. Yeah. Like and Westbrook won it because he was a triple double guy. But that was just but again, he was the same with the usage. He was in the high 30s, and Tatum's like, I don't think he's even cracked 30. Maybe he's cracked 30 like once. And it's like,
yeah, I think he was 30, that like almost dead nuts 30 might have been.
He was 28% in the past playoffs, tied with Jaylen Brown. It's just like he's not the guy that's going to have the ball enough anytime soon. And so he's just not going to have the counting stats to be an MVP guy.
And you might be listening to this show thinking, oh, great, another segment where they just talk about how awesome Jayson Tatum is again, as we're very
welcome to the show, folks.
Yeah, absolutely. But like he just continues to play the right way and like embody these like Red Auerbach approaches to the game and really just do everything that is asked of him both on and off the court, and yet criminally underrated for just being, this sounds corny, but like being the best Jayson Tatum that he can be, that the team needs him to be, and not like really going outside of those well-defined lines. And that's just such an underrated trait, an underrated quality. So we're going to continue to celebrate that. The incels on NBA Reddit are going to continue to do the opposite, and forever the twain shall dance. We're going to come back in a moment with some news, but first, here's a word from our friends over at GameTime.
It's finally football season. The West Virginia Mountaineers kick off the season against number 8 Penn State in Morgantown. I'll be using GameTime to easily find incredible deals on great tickets in Milan Puskar Stadium to catch the Mounties hopefully upset the Nittany Lions. When you jump on GameTime, it's got the stadium right in front of you. It's really easy to find awesome seats. You can get amazing deals like the aptly named Super Deal, which can save money and get you a great spot in the stadium. It's also got concert tickets and tickets to a bunch of other shows, so definitely check that out. Personally, I love the all-in pricing, which you toggle on, and GameTime shows you the full price up front, no surprise fees at checkout. So take the guesswork out of buying concert tickets or sports tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
Shout out GameTime, shout out the CLNS Network for presenting the First to the Floor YouTube show and podcast. Big game coming up this Sunday in the NFL, the Bengals versus the Chiefs, I'm told.
That was
I'm told
awesome.
very directly by our friends at CLNS and GameTime that this is a hugely important game. Jake, Spoonie, you guys probably have more to add there than I do.
Burrow,
Yeah, dude.
Mahomes,
Dude,
come on,
Burrow-
baby.
Big names, big names.
Bengals are a shit show. I've already
Cook.
placed my Chiefs minus 5.5 bet. So
Same.
Yeah, locked in. I'm legitimately excited for the Patriots this weekend. Like, I have not been really excited for a Patriots game in a long time, but I was inspired by the win against the Bengals, and the Patriots are actually underdogs by like 3.5 points. So I actually like taking the Pats plus 3.5 as well there. So, yeah, man, get me a little football. First 4 weeks of the season, let's go football.
Yeah, hop on a
Ramondre needs
plane.
Ramondre needs like 40 carries, I think.
He's gonna get him, baby.
Yeah,
Let's go.
probably. Yeah.
Well, yeah, look, if you want to see it in person, pull up the GameTime app, get yourself a good deal to get to that fixture or several others. We're going to be back in a moment. Actually, in a moment, we're going to get to the Neemias Queta deep dive. But first, we've got some news. That's right. The Celtics have completed their 21-man training camp roster by signing Jordan Schakel to an Exhibit 10 contract. Per Bobby Manning of Celtics blog, this completes their geez, I really stuffed that up. Their training camp roster as far as Exhibit 10 deals are concerned. So the other one's going to Lonnie Walker the fourth, Ron Harper Jr., and Tristan Anaruna. So I don't know, guys, thoughts, takes on Jordan Schakel. We'll run some film of him, who he obviously played for the Maine Celtics last year, and he's a bit of a shooter from what I can tell. But did you expect to see much of him beyond training camp? I guess is a good jumping off point.
No, I would be stunned if we ever see him touch an NBA court, especially with the 2024-2025 Boston Celtics. But he's tall-ish and can shoot. So that's the shooting with size prerequisite to join the Boston Celtics at the moment.
Yeah, he shot 39% in the G League the last 2 years. He only played 10 games for Maine last year, but shot 39%. Yeah, he's 6'6" wing who played with Malachi Flynn on some really good San Diego State teams. So, winner, clearly, massive winner. But I know nothing about this guy. I feel like we're all in the top 1% of NBA fans, right? We follow this stuff pretty closely. Never heard of the man in my life. Although I do recognize him from when I'd like catch JD Davison highlights. And I was like, oh, that's who that guy is. I have some recollection. But yeah, I know, I'm going to be honest here, guys. I know nothing about his game other than he shoots and his height.
Yeah, I think that's okay. He's just like, he's contracted to come in and defend Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown and like space the floor on the B team to like force our guys to think at least a little bit defensively. Like that's essentially his short-term contract with the Celtics. And it sounds like some of these other Exhibit 10 contracts, he'll get an opportunity to play in Maine again. And with that comes a cash bonus, undisclosed figure. But obviously there's a lot to be gained from Jordan Schakel's perspective to undertake this role with the Celtics, and hopefully he can challenge our guys and, whatever it takes, as long as it takes. So if he can force the Jays or Peyton Pritchard or whoever to think about their approach on either end of the court, even just for a moment, that might lead to Banner 19, which is obviously a huge stretch.
Thank you,
Should we just get
Jordan.
onto the... Yes, exactly. Thank you, Jordan. The Neemias Queta deep dive, getting on to some more important stuff, but all credit to Jordan Schakel there. The deep dive, this has been a pretty popular series so far this offseason, where we do deep dives on, more particularly the sort of deeper end of the bench guys whose impact on the team throughout the regular season, their role, where they sit in the rotation, might be under some degree of questioning. So Neemias Queta, I think it can be a little bit divisive. There's a Luke Cornett cohort of fandom, there's a Neemias Queta cohort, and they're at odds with each other. So Spoonie, I'll throw it to you. You've thrown some good stats in our run sheet here. What's the skinny on Neemias Queta this year?
Okay, so I think broadly, I'm not going to say anything people don't already know about Neemias Queta. He is kind of what you see is what you get with this dude, but super limited offensive player, right? He shot 74% in the restricted area, 36% in the paint outside the restricted area, which is not good, especially for a 7-footer. He took 2 shots outside of the paint in the entire season, which almost seems impossible considering how much garbage time he played. But I just think generally Queta has a clearly defined offensive role. He's a good screen setter, and he's an elite roll man by sort of the play type synergy numbers, 95th percentile. which is, it's kind of difficult to parse anything out of that because a lot of those are probably in garbage time when teams aren't playing defense at 100%, but screening well is a translatable skill, and he's athletic. Like, he has some vertical athleticism, so you can keep it really simple with him, and he can be pretty effective, at least when it comes to scoring the ball, despite him being extraordinarily limited.
Yeah, look, I think I'm the resident Queta hater on the podcast here, just because of how much I actually like Luke Cornett. And this is like a classic dimensions conversation. Like, Luke Cornett, he's not popping off the screen, like he's not getting his head above the rim in a way that Neemias Queta can do. And that's exciting. So, like, there's definitely a tantalizing potential element to someone like Queta. It's like, oh my God, he hasn't really played that much basketball. Maybe he figures it out. Still, he's got a little bit of passing chops. But the reality is, when I watch him play, it's like that's kind of all he is he's a raw, theoretically guy with potential. And outside of that, I'm not really a big fan. The decision making's kind of slow. But again, this is contextual to him being a minimum. He's like our third big or fourth big.
Off
fifth
the bench,
big.
he's the third
Yeah.
big. Yeah.
Yeah, he's like our fifth big once you include Kristaps Porzingis. And if we're talking about it in that context, I like him. A little bit of potential, a little bit of a project, proven he can do two things, which is set those screens, Spoonie. And yeah, just like when you're on the court, set a screen, roll to the rim, and hustle. Like, he's got a good motor, and if you're going to be that big and strong and that able to jump that high, you're going to be able to at least be fine. It's where I have a problem is when people cite his like off stuff. He played 333 minutes this season, which is fuck all, and he was had a net rating of 19.71 when he was on the court, which is like would be twice the net rating of the 64 win historically dominant Boston Celtics. So obviously there's some noise on that. And it's like the defense was the same on and off. He just happened to be on the court when the Celtics hit a ton of threes. That's all that happened really in like a bunch of those minutes. But again, 333 minutes of him not being a disaster with that little bit of potential. I'm here for, now that we've got the chip, I'm like, yeah, give him some reps. Let's see if he can develop a little bit. Can he, like, he's got a little bit of that young Rob-itis in that it's like he doesn't know exactly where to be in the drop. He's a little jump happy on pump fakes. Because like playing drop coverage is not, created equal among all players. Kristaps Porzingis is an elite drop defender, not just because he's incredibly tall and long. It's because he's got a high basketball IQ. He knows when he should and should not be jumping, where to contest, how to impact shots. Luke Cornett's like a level down in that level of, dimensions and IQ. And Queta's kind of like a bit more dimensions than Luke, but struggles with the IQ side of like, how far up should I be on the level? Should I be jumping on a lob or a pump fake? Like, that's the part of the drop coverage that he's not great at yet, but he also hasn't played a lot. So I'm intrigued to see, because if he can figure that out, I do think he has some tools to be a positive defender.
Yeah, it's interesting with the net rating because it's like, who is he typically playing against? Is it just a case that our really deep bench is better than most opposition's really deep bench? Because the other stat is
maybe.
Well, that too, obviously. But 17.1 offensive rebounding percentage, which is good for 99th percentile per cleaning the glass, and small sample size. But again, it's like, who's boxing him out at that point? Like, who is he really fighting for to get those boards at such a high clip? But yeah, similar to Luke.
How many of those are his own misses too?
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Doing a little Angel Reese action in there.
Similar to Luke Cornett, he's efficient in that he just like sticks to what he's good at. He stays in his lane. The problem is like his scope is even narrower than Cornett's. But this tracks, and it's fine for who is essentially a fourth string big. If Luke Cornett is a perfect third string big, then Neemias Queta is essentially a perfect fourth string big, I think. But a lot of similarities to Cornett, but where he really differs is just his overall awareness. You guys touched on this. In other words, like, how often does he put himself or a teammate in a position to succeed, whether that's the quality or the timing of a screen, like a roll or where to position himself around the dunker spot. Like Cornet's hoops acumen is just way better in that regard than Neemias Queta. It's a tough one for the dimensions people of the world, myself included, because it's like clearly that's not enough. Like you actually have to have some sort of hoops acumen to complement that, and that's what we're sort of waiting for in the case of Neemias Queta, at least offensively.
Yeah, he's okay, I think, at finding himself in the dunker spot, but that's also like the easiest thing to do in basketball. It's like stand there, and when when the help defense comes, I'm gonna drop it off to you, and you can dunk it. So, but yeah, it just goes back to like he's very limited offensively. So those are the types of ways you're going to have to use him. Question for you guys, all right? There were a couple times where he made some like pretty high level passes. Dare I say, not Rob Williams-esque, who he's only a year younger than Rob Will. Yeah. So by the way, so it's like, I don't know how much untapped potential there truly is with him, but he made some really nice passes. I think he had one like sweet backdoor to Sam Hauser near the end of the season, 20 assists to 13 turnovers, which is like kind of an encouraging assist to turnover ratio for what is essentially like a stone-handed center. Is there any passing upside in Neemias Queta, fellas?
I think there's a tiny bit.
Okay,
but again, Luke Cornett's a really good passer for his position. Like big men that can pass are quite valuable because like they're gonna find themselves in advantageous spots around the dunker spot. Defenses will collapse. Can you make quick decisions on the short roll, stuff like that? I saw little signs, but again, it's a lot of wish casting. It feels like, and that's okay. So Queta, if you play the game, how tall do you have to be before myself personally, before I am ready to make the NBA? Queta like checks that box for me. Like he's 7 foot and super springy and strong. And the skill set that he's got, like how many Division II 5'9" guards would instantly be better than him. That's kind of like where I'm at on Queta. But lucky for Queta, he's 7 foot tall. So I'm very jealous.
Yeah, with the passing, I don't know. It's like, do we really ask that of you? If you host a party and someone rocks up with a bunch of cheese, you're like, didn't really ask you to bring that. Now I've got to find a cheese board. I've got to like present it. I've got to serve it. This is now extra work for me. Like, are we really going to be able to factor Queta's maybe passing ability into our overall like team game and approach? Like, probably not. So I would rather him focus on like bettering the skills that are asked of him. That said, it was a lot of fun watching the Time Lord throw Dime Lord. So if we can get something similar out of Neemias Queta, like I'm a fan of the game. I'm a fan of the flourishes of aesthetic beauty. So yeah, I'm all for it, but I don't think it necessarily like has much of an impact on the team long term.
Yeah, well, and like he doesn't need to become like a Rob level passer, like, but if he could make a decision on the short roll, that's not the wrong one. Like that really, that's what Luke's so good at. Is like, it's not like he's passing dudes open on backdoor cuts, but he makes the right decision just about every time, and that is the next step for Queta. He might get there. I don't know. That's a pretty hard jump to make, I think, when you're a fairly unskilled, no offense, Neemias, big man. So we'll see. Defense, you guys want to talk defense now?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, all right, Jake, you said it. He's slow-footed. He's a drop center. You absolutely cannot switch with him. But I think the big thing about if you are a slow-footed drop center, you have to protect the rim. Queta actually had the second best defensive field goal percentage, less than 10 feet on the team, way behind KP, but better than Luke Cornett. Again, I think part of that is probably who he's playing against. And a lot of that's altered by garbage time, but still, like he was a plus-ish rim protector in the minutes he played, which is all you can really ask of him. He can only perform when he's playing, right?
I am interested by what the Celtics coaching staff can do with Queta, because I do think if they can get him to play solid positionally, like if you were able to transport Kelly Olynyk's defensive brain into Neemias Queta's body, that would be a really good defender. Like all Queta has to do is be sound positionally, not bite on pump fakes, and he'll be a completely competent rotation big man in the NBA. That's how big and athletic he is. Because defensive rebounding wise, as long as he's like not biting on pump fakes and like going over late for blocks that he can't get and putting himself out of defensive rebounding position, then I think he can be totally fine. So I am interested to see, like, as they did with Rob. And again, that could be a reps thing. I kind of called him out for not playing a lot of minutes and there being a lot of noise in his net rating, but part of it as well, he doesn't have a lot of reps in the NBA either. So, like, does he get a little more comfortable if he gets more reps? Then yeah, I'm definitely, again, similar to Xavier Tillman shooting threes. No one would be happier to be proven wrong than me if Queta comes out and turns into, Clint Capella on defense.
That'd be nice. Yeah. It's the little things, and like, can more playing time and the experience that comes from that, and with those little things, like you said, like not biting on pump fakes and just understanding like where to position yourself relative to the level of the screen. Can he be coached out of those little things to really improve? Synergy rates Neemi like really highly as a pick and roll man offensively. Defensively, he's just kind of average, 68th percentile on points per possession ranking, defending the big, and then that drops significantly, 39th percentile when he's forced to switch onto the ball handler, which is like crazy low sample size, so whatever. But there are like small fundamental aspects of the game that you would like to think almost anyone could be coached out of, and you add the extra playing time that he's going to get, and this like kind of leads to the next question. You add that extra playing time, and then like hopefully he can sort of lift himself, elevate himself out of that rut defensively. So it begs the question, like, where is he going to sit as far as the rotation is concerned going into this year, particularly in the pre-KP chunk of the calendar?
I think he will play. He might play those 300 minutes or more in this first stretch of the season when KP is out. I mean, he is like a legitimately good rebounder. Like, he led the team in offensive and defensive rebound percentage last year. So like, I think that's important. Like, a backup big who can like kind of roll to the rim and clean up the glass and protect the rim a little bit is like a playable rotation, like a low end rotation big man. And like, Horford's going to rest whether KP is playing or not. Horford's going to rest. And then, there's some matchups where I don't love Xavier Tillman. I think there's less of them than me not loving Neemias Queta. But there still are some matchups where I think it makes sense to just stay big with Kornet and Queta. So he's going to get some minutes, but he, I think, is clearly the fifth guy on the depth chart at center.
Yeah. And I've said it before. I don't love loading Tillman up with minutes either. He's got his own injury history as well. Like, when Horford's out, there's 48, big man minutes. Do you just split 24 for Tillman, 24 for Kornet? That's kind of a lot for big men. Like, so it would not surprise me if he's still playing 6 to 8 minutes in those games as well. It's going to be really interesting to see. We know how much Joe loves Kornet. I think you can like bank Luke Kornet playing probably 20 minutes a night, I would say, for the first 6 months of the season. That's going to, take into account Horford playing and him being out. And then after that, we'll see, because we were calling for Tillman a lot, and he obviously got his time to shine in the playoffs, but didn't get a ton of minutes regular season or playoffs. So we'll see what happens with Queta here. But yeah, he's going to get a chance. He's going to get a chance.
Is there any situation where you prefer Queta for a stretch of a game over Kornet? Is there any specific set of circumstances you can conjure in your mind?
Well,
I can't.
I was thinking Philly, the backup big man is Drummond, and he's just such a good rebounder that, like, you talk about the rebounding numbers. Maybe when it's getting killed on the boards, you chuck out, or the Knicks. Even I'm less worried about them now without Hartenstein. But yeah, it's a great, like, that the strategy of the opposing team in the Knicks is going to be tilted towards offensive rebounds. So like, if you're getting killed, great call. Maybe those are the spots. Like the Houston Rockets for big offensive rebounders. Like, maybe that's a Queta spot. Maybe those sorts of teams, you get him in there.
Yeah, I mean, Kornet, I feel like his rebounding improved after Jake called him out.
That's right.
But, clearly these guys read our tweets. So.
Hell yeah.
But I still think rebounding is probably a weakness of Kornet's game, at least compared to some of his larger positives. And Queta's a different player. He's a more dangerous lob threat. So I guess if teams are just kind of conceding that. They're not sending that backside help. Maybe you think, well, we'll get Neemi in there to just like catch lobs over the defense. Kornet can kind of do that too, but I still think Queta gives you a little more dynamicism, if that's a word, on that pick and roll with his vertical spacing. So I guess I say that to say there are very, very, very few circumstances where I'd prefer Queta to Kornet, but I suppose they exist somewhere. There is going to be a game out there where he will play better than Luke Kornet.
Hey, man, Luke was almost out of the league. People were low on him, and he really found his way. There's a reality that exists, I think, where Queta really comes into his own and harnesses the tools at his disposal. But I'm not someone who thinks that's the reality we're going to be living in.
Yeah. Either. Well, look, next week, the Sam Hauser deep dive episode. We were talking about this yesterday during the Game 1 rewatch party, and Jake Eisenberg, definitely the catalyst for this. He is leading the charge, but we are all in on the Sam Hauser propaganda machine this year. We will be driving the Sam Hauser is one of the best backup wings in the league narrative all year. And that begins early next week on the Sam Hauser deep dive episode. So make sure you subscribe, preferably both on YouTube and your preferred podcast app. Spoonie, Jake, any final thoughts on anything we've discussed today before we wrap this one up?
I'm very excited for the Sam Hauser deep dive. You can't give me all the credit. It starts with Ben calling Sam Hauser mellow, which only became more and more true. So, I'm really excited, and I'm very high on Hauser, especially now that he's locked up long term. I think we'll get into it, but his development is quite important for the future of this team.
I'm going to come with a list of role players, and I want you guys to tell me if Sam Hauser is better or worse than that specific role player that I present.
I already know the answer to all of those.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. That's going to be a lot of fun. All right, folks, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate our audience. We love interacting with you, so please leave a comment, join the Discord, hit us up. Let's talk some Celts. Spoonie, Jake, love your work, guys. Until next time, go Celtics.